The clock struck the hour, marking the commencement of another night shift for Mary, a woman of few words and many tasks, who found in cleaning the imposing Varela and Associates building in downtown Chicago the means to support her small family. The mirrored glass walls of the building, which during the day reflected the grandeur of Lake Michigan's sunsets in fiery hues, at night transformed into cold ramparts that guarded secrets and high-stakes negotiations. Mary, with her cleaning cart, creaking softly through the corridors, knew every floor, every room, every corner of that place, from the bustling trading desks on the lower levels to the hushed executive suites on the top floors. But she never allowed herself to become involved in the mysteries that lay hidden there. That night, however, an unusual unease hung in the air, thick as the city fog rolling in off the lake, as if the habitual silence was charged with an invisible tension, a harbinger that Mary's routine was about to be irrevocably altered. Upon reaching the 30th floor, the designated meeting space, she noticed a sliver of light seeping from under the heavy oak door of the main conference room, an uncommon detail that made her hesitate before proceeding with her work. Curiosity, a flame that Mary had always strived to keep extinguished, began to flicker in her chest, fueled by the premonition that something out of the ordinary was happening. Pushing the door open cautiously, she peered into the room and her eyes met John Varela, the powerful owner of Varela and Associates, a major player in Chicago's financial district, surrounded by a mountain of papers scattered across the extensive marble table. Two men in sharp Armani suits, with the posture and sharp gaze of lawyers from LaSalle Street, whispered in grave tones, their fragmented words reaching Mary's ears. If he signs, Darkon acquires controlling interest, calculated risks, substantial upside. Mary felt a shiver run down her spine, a sensation as cold as the January wind whipping off the windy city. She knew she shouldn't be there, that her presence was an intrusion into a world of million-dollar deals and ruthless ambition that didn't belong to her. But the intensity of the scene and the sinister tone of the conversation paralyzed her, trapping her in a web of curiosity and apprehension that prevented her from simply walking away and going about her business. Mary subtly shifted her weight, pretending to straighten a stack of magazines on a nearby coffee table, her movements slow and deliberate, designed to appear casual, yet her mind raced, dissecting the snippets of conversation she managed to catch. This contract, a game changer, John, one of the lawyers, a tall, imposing figure with slicked back hair and a voice that resonated with the confidence of a seasoned shark, emphasized, his tone laced with an almost predatory eagerness. The other, shorter and more nervous, chimed in, "The Darkon deal. It's the key to unlocking unprecedented growth. But of course, due diligence is paramount." John Varela, a man whose presence usually filled the room with an aura of unwavering authority, seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, his brow furrowed, his gaze distant as he stared at the papers before him, as if they were a complex puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Mary couldn't shake the feeling that she was witnessing something clandestine, a high-stakes power play unfolding in hushed whispers, and the weight of it pressed down on her, an invisible force urging her to retreat, to disappear back into the anonymity of her night shift. But an inexplicable pull, a strange sense of foreboding, kept her rooted to the spot. It was more than mere curiosity. It was as if an alarm bell was ringing deep within her, a primal instinct warning her of impending danger. She tried to focus on her task, wiping down the polished surface of a credenza, the scent of lemon cleaner momentarily, masking the tension in the air. But the lawyers' voices, though lowered, continued to weave their web of intrigue. Control, leverage, a strategic acquisition, they murmured, their words painting a picture of a calculated maneuver, a hostile takeover cloaked in the language of business opportunity. John Varela finally spoke, his voice raspy, laced with fatigue and a hint of vulnerability that Mary found unsettling. "I need more time. This is a significant commitment." The lawyers, however, seemed relentless, their pressure mounting, their arguments becoming more insistent, more forceful, as if they were determined to push him towards a decision he wasn't ready to make. Mary's unease deepened. She couldn't pinpoint exactly what felt so wrong, but the atmosphere in the room was thick with a sense of manipulation, of a hidden agenda lurking beneath the surface of the deal. Mary's heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against the backdrop of the hushed conversation. She meticulously wiped the surface of the conference table, her movements mechanical, her eyes darting between the men as she tried to decipher the undercurrents of the exchange. John Varela, his face etched with a weariness that belied his usual composure, ran a hand through his thinning hair, his fingers leaving a trail in the slicked-back strands. He mumbled a response, his words indistinct, swallowed by the thick carpet and the weight of the decisions hanging in the balance. Mary strained to hear, her senses heightened, her intuition screaming that something was amiss. It was as if the air in the room had thickened, becoming heavy with unspoken intentions, with a sense of urgency that felt both unnatural and dangerous. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was intruding on a scene she wasn't meant to witness, a clandestine meeting where the fate of the company, and perhaps much more, was being negotiated in shadows. A knot of anxiety tightened in Mary's stomach, a cold dread that spread through her veins like ice water. She desperately wanted to leave, to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the conference room and return to the familiar comfort of her routine, but an invisible force held her captive. She picked up a stray pen from the table, her fingers tracing its smooth surface, her mind racing to make sense of the fragments she'd overheard. A strategic partnership, a synergy of assets, a mutually beneficial arrangement. The lawyers droned on, their words, slick and polished, designed to reassure, to persuade, but Mary detected a discordant note beneath the surface, a hint of coercion that sent a shiver down her spine. John Varela sighed, a sound heavy with resignation, and reached for a document lying before him, his hand hovering over the signature line as if he were contemplating a leap of faith into the abyss. Mary's breath caught in her throat. She had to get out of there, but it was too late. John Varela finally lifted the pen, the weight of the moment palpable in the silence that descended upon the room. Mary's breath hitched. She couldn't bear to watch him seal a deal that felt so inherently wrong. She desperately needed to leave, to put distance between herself and the insidious energy that permeated the room. But before she could make her escape, John's gaze swept across the room and landed on her. His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, as if he'd just noticed a ghost lurking in the shadows. The lawyers, their faces impassive, also turned their attention to her, their eyes sharp and assessing, their silence heavy with unspoken questions. Mary froze, caught in their collective gaze, feeling a blush creep up her neck as she realized the awkwardness of her position. She was an intruder, a silent observer in a world where she didn't belong, and now she'd been caught. I apologize, Mr. Varela," Mary stammered, her voice barely a whisper, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the cleaning cloth. "I was just finishing up. I'll be out of your way in a moment." She desperately tried to convey her insignificance, to assure them that she hadn't heard anything, hadn't understood the implications of their words, but her explanation sounded weak even to her own ears. John Varela, however, didn't seem particularly concerned. He waved his hand dismissively, his attention already drifting back to the contract lying before him. "It's quite all right, Mary," he said, his voice laced with the weariness she'd noticed earlier. "No harm done." The lawyers, though, remained silent, their eyes still fixed on her, their expressions unreadable. Mary, sensing that she was still under scrutiny, mumbled another apology and turned to leave, desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the room. As Mary turned to leave, a phrase, spoken with a chilling finality, snagged her attention and halted her in the doorway. "If all goes according to plan, John, Darkin will have absolute control. It's a bold move, but the payoff will be substantial." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication, painting a stark picture of a complete takeover, a hostile acquisition masked as a business transaction. Mary's sense of unease intensified, morphing into a cold dread that gripped her from the inside out. The name, Darkin, echoed in her mind, triggering a faint but persistent alarm, a sense of familiarity intertwined with a deep-seated apprehension. She couldn't place where she'd heard it before, but it felt ominous, like a warning sign flashing in the darkness. Mary backed away from the conference room, pushing her cleaning cart down the hallway, the wheels squeaking softly in the otherwise silent corridor. The conversation she'd overheard replayed in her mind, each phrase, each tone, each unspoken implication adding to the growing disquiet within her. There was something deeply unsettling about the deal, a sense of manipulation and hidden agendas that she couldn't quite articulate. The name Darkin continued to nag at her, a persistent itch in the back of her mind, refusing to be ignored. It was as if a buried memory was struggling to surface, a connection to something from her past that she couldn't quite grasp. A shiver ran down her spine, a premonition that this night, this chance encounter, was about to pull her into a vortex of events that would change her life forever. Mary continued her work, forcing herself to focus on the mundane tasks, but the weight of the overheard conversation clung to her like a shadow. She emptied trash cans, dusted desks, and vacuumed the plush carpets, her movements precise and efficient, honed by years of routine. But her mind was a whirlwind of unanswered questions and nagging anxieties. The name Darkin pulsed in her thoughts, an insistent drumbeat that drowned out the hum of the building's ventilation system and the distant sounds of the city below. She couldn't shake the feeling that it was a key, a hidden piece of a puzzle she didn't even know she was trying to solve, and the frustration of not being able to place it gnawed at her. As she made her way to the employee break room, a small, brightly lit space tucked away in a corner of the floor, Mary tried to rationalize her unease. It was just a business deal, she told herself, a high-stakes negotiation between powerful men, a world that had nothing to do with her. She was a cleaner, an invisible presence in the grand scheme of things, and her opinion, her instincts were irrelevant. But the memory of John Varella's hesitant demeanor, the lawyer's insistent pressure, and the chilling finality of the phrase absolute control refused to be silenced. It was as if a small voice within her was whispering a warning, urging her to pay attention, to not dismiss the unsettling feeling that had taken root in her soul. Mary poured herself a cup of lukewarm coffee from the communal pot, the bitter liquid doing little to dispel the chill that had settled over her. She sat at one of the small formica-topped tables, the fluorescent lights of the break room casting harsh shadows on the faces of the other night shift workers, their expressions weary and resigned. But Mary's mind was far away from the mundane reality of her surroundings. She was trapped in the echo chamber of the conference room, the lawyer's words reverberating in her thoughts, the name Darkin a persistent throbbing pulse. She stared into the dark depths of her coffee cup, as if seeking an answer in the swirling liquid, a clue to unlock the mystery that had begun to unravel itself in her life. A wave of unease washed over Mary, a certainty that the contract being discussed was not what it seemed. Her instincts, honed by years of navigating the complexities of life, screamed a warning, a primal urge to flee from the impending danger. She couldn't explain it, couldn't articulate the source of her apprehension, but the feeling was undeniable, a cold premonition that settled deep in her bones. She took a deep breath, the stale air of the break room doing little to calm her racing heart, and tried to focus on the task ahead, the endless cycle of cleaning and polishing that was her livelihood. But the disquiet persisted, a shadow lurking at the edge of her awareness, refusing to be ignored. Mary pushed her empty coffee cup aside, the clatter echoing in the silence of the break room. Drawing a few weary glances from her colleagues, she forced a smile, a gesture of reassurance, but her heart was racing, her mind consumed by the nagging feeling that she was on the precipice of something dangerous. She glanced at the clock on the wall, its digital display flashing the relentless march of time, and realized that her shift was far from over. The thought of returning to the hushed corridors, to the lingering tension of the conference room, filled her with a sense of dread. But duty called, and she knew she couldn't simply abandon her responsibilities. No matter how much her instincts screamed at her to run. With a sigh that carried the weight of her growing apprehension, Mary left the break room and resumed her cleaning routine. She moved through the office floors, her movements efficient and practiced, but her senses were heightened. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the elevator, amplified in the silence of the night. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that unseen eyes were following her every move, and the weight of the name Darkin pressed down on her. a chilling reminder of the mystery that had begun to unfold. As she approached the conference room again, a sense of inevitability washed over her. She knew she couldn't avoid the source of her unease forever. As Mary approached the conference room, the scene inside remained unchanged. John Varela was still hunched over the contract, his brow furrowed in concentration, while the lawyers hovered nearby, their expressions unreadable. The air in the Sioux room crackled with the same tension that had greeted her earlier, an invisible force that seemed to push her back, to warn her away. But Mary pressed on, her feet carrying her forward despite the apprehension that gnawed at her. She had to finish her work, had to confront the source of her unease, even if it meant facing the unknown. Steeling herself, Mary stepped into the room, her presence immediately drawing the attention of the three men. John Varela looked up, his eyes widening slightly as he registered her return. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, quickly replaced by a weary resignation. The lawyers, their faces impassive, turned their sharp gazes on her, their silence heavy with unspoken questions. Mary, trying to appear nonchalant, mumbled, "Excuse me, gentlemen, I'm just finishing up here." Her voice sounded weak and uncertain, betraying the turmoil within her. John Varela nodded, his gaze already returning to the papers spread before him. "Of course, Mary. No need to apologize." He seemed eager to dismiss her, to resume the interrupted negotiation, his mind clearly preoccupied with the complex decisions he faced. The lawyers, however, lingered, their eyes following Mary as she moved towards the door, their expressions still unreadable, their silence more unsettling than any words they could have spoken. Mary felt their scrutiny like a physical weight, a pressure that urged her to leave, to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the room and the lingering sense of dread that clung to her. As Mary reached the hallway, her hand on the doorknob, she heard a phrase, spoken with a chilling finality, that stopped her in her tracks. "If this goes through, John, Darkin will have complete control. It's a risky play, but the potential rewards are immense." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication, painting a stark picture of a hostile takeover, a calculated maneuver to seize power. Mary's blood ran cold. The name Darkin, which had been a nagging whisper, in the back of her mind, now resonated with a sinister clarity. It was more than just a name. It was a symbol of something dangerous, something she instinctively knew she had to fear. Mary hurried away from the conference room, her cleaning cart rattling behind her, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent hallway. The words she had overheard played on repeat in her mind, each syllable a hammer blow against the fragile walls of her composure. Complete control, a risky play, immense rewards. The implications of those phrases were terrifying, painting a picture of a calculated takeover, a ruthless power grab that could have devastating consequences. The name Darkon, once a vague whisper in the background of her thoughts, now loomed large, a dark cloud obscuring her sense of reason. She had to understand what it meant, what its connection to this deal was, and why it triggered such a visceral reaction within her. As Mary pushed her cart towards the elevator, a sense of disorientation washed over her, as if the familiar corridors of the building had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. The faces of her fellow night shift workers, usually a source of quiet camaraderie, now seemed distant and unfamiliar, their eyes reflecting the same weariness and resignation she often felt. But tonight, there was something more, a shared sense of unease that hung heavy in the air, a collective awareness that something was amiss. Mary couldn't shake the feeling that she was no longer just a cleaner in a silent building. She was a witness to something sinister, a player in a game she didn't understand, and the stakes were far higher than she could have ever imagined. Mary reached the ground floor, the hum of the city a stark contrast to the sterile silence of the office building. She stepped out onto the busy sidewalk, the cacophony of car horns, chattering pedestrians, and distant sirens assaulting her senses. But even the vibrant energy of Chicago couldn't dispel the unease that clung to her. The name Darkin echoed in her mind, a persistent reminder of the mystery that had begun to unravel in her life. She hailed a cab, the yellow vehicle weaving through the traffic with practiced ease. But Mary's thoughts remained trapped within the confines of the conference room, replaying the snippets of conversation, the ominous implications, and the chilling weight of the unknown. As the cab sped towards her small apartment on the south side, Mary tried to piece together the fragments of information she had gathered. Darken. The name felt familiar, like a half-remembered melody, a faded photograph from a forgotten past. A wave of discomfort washed over her, a sense of dread that settled deep in her bones. It was more than just a name. It was a trigger, a key that unlocked a hidden chamber of her memory, a place she had long tried to keep locked away. A premonition, cold and sharp as a Chicago winter wind, pierced through her, warning her that this night, this chance encounter, was about to drag her into a confrontation with her past, a battle she wasn't sure she was ready to fight. Back in her modest apartment, nestled in a quiet neighborhood far removed from the gleaming skyscrapers of downtown Chicago, Mary couldn't shake the unsettling events of the night. The image of John Varella's weary face, the lawyer's predatory whispers, and the chilling finality of the name Darkon played on repeat in her mind, a relentless loop of anxiety and foreboding. She paced the small living room, the worn carpet beneath her feet a familiar comfort. But tonight, even the familiar surroundings couldn't quell the storm of unease brewing within her. The contract, the deal, the ominous name, it all felt wrong, inherently corrupt, and her instincts screamed at her to uncover the truth, to expose the darkness lurking beneath the surface of the Varela and Associates building. Mary glanced at the clock on the wall, its hands ticking with a relentless urgency, reminding her of the precious time slipping away. She still had hours of work ahead of her, the endless cycle of cleaning and polishing that provided a meager existence for her and her family. But the restlessness within her refused to be silenced, the nagging feeling that she was on the verge of something significant, something that would irrevocably alter the course of her life. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that this night, this chance encounter, was just the beginning of a journey into the heart of a conspiracy, a battle against forces far more powerful and dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Mary returned to the Varela and Associates building, the cold night air a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere of her apartment. She pushed her cleaning cart through the deserted corridors, the silence amplifying the echo of her footsteps and the incessant drumbeat of her thoughts. The encounter in the conference room weighed heavily on her, a premonition of danger mixed with a burning curiosity that refused to be extinguished. She knew she couldn't simply ignore what she had witnessed. Something was deeply wrong with the Darken deal, and her instincts urged her to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. She glanced at the clock on the wall, its digital display counting down the minutes of her shift, and realized that she still had hours of work ahead of her. The prospect of facing the hushed offices, the lingering tension of the conference room filled her with a sense of dread. But duty called, and she knew she couldn't simply abandon her responsibilities, no matter how much her heart pounded with apprehension. As she resumed her routine, a sense of inevitability settled over her. She was on a collision course with destiny, and there was no turning back. As Mary moved through the dimly lit corridors, her mind raced, replaying the snippets of conversation she had overheard, the ominous implications of the Darken deal, and the chilling weight of the unknown. The silence of the building, usually a source of comfort, now felt oppressive, amplifying the echo of her footsteps and the incessant drumbeat of her thoughts. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that unseen eyes were following her every move, and the name Darkon pulsed in her mind, a persistent reminder of the mystery that had begun to unravel in her life. It was as if the building itself was holding its breath, anticipating a confrontation that was both inevitable and terrifying. Reaching the upper floors where the executive offices were located, Mary felt a shift in the atmosphere, a palpable increase in tension that hung heavy in the air. The doors to the offices were closed, their polished surfaces reflecting the dim light like mirrors, obscuring the secrets that lay within. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was treading on dangerous ground, that she was venturing into a world where she didn't belong, a world of power and ambition, where the stakes were far higher than she could have ever imagined. A shiver ran down her spine, a premonition that this night, this chance encounter, was about to drag her into a battle against forces far more powerful and ruthless than she could have ever conceived. Mary tried to push aside the unsettling thoughts, to focus on the task at hand, but the words she had overheard refused to be silenced. They echoed in her mind, a relentless reminder of the darkness lurking beneath the surface of the polished corporate world. The name Darkon, once a distant whisper, now resonated with a chilling clarity, a symbol of something sinister, something she instinctively knew she had to fear. She wiped down the sleek surfaces of desks, emptied trash cans overflowing with discarded documents, and vacuumed the plush carpets, her movements precise and efficient, but her mind was a whirlwind of unanswered questions and growing apprehension. As she cleaned the long corridor leading back to the conference room, Mary couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn into a dangerous game, a high-stakes confrontation with forces far more powerful and ruthless than she could have ever imagined. The contract, the deal, the ominous name, it all felt wrong, inherently corrupt, and her instincts screamed at her to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The silence of the building, usually a source of comfort, now felt oppressive, amplifying the echo of her footsteps and the incessant drumbeat of her thoughts. It was as if the very walls were whispering warnings, urging her to turn back before it was too late. The word Darkon pulsed in Mary's mind, a relentless alarm that refused to be silenced. It was more than just a name. It was a symbol of something dark and dangerous, a trigger that unlocked a hidden chamber of her memory, a place she had long tried to keep locked away. A cold dread settled over her, a premonition that this night, this chance encounter, was about to drag her into a confrontation with her past, a battle against forces far more powerful and ruthless than she could have ever conceived. She wiped down the sleek surfaces of desks, emptied trash cans overflowing with discarded documents, and vacuumed the plush carpets, her movements precise and efficient, but her mind was a whirlwind of unanswered questions and growing apprehension. Finishing her tasks on the last floor, Mary noticed that the lights in John Varella's office were still on, casting a warm glow through the partially open door. A wave of curiosity, mixed with a healthy dose of hesitation, washed over her. She knew she should simply move on, complete her shift, and leave the secrets of the Varela and Associates building to the powerful men who inhabited it. But the nagging feeling that something was deeply wrong with the darkened deal, the persistent echo of the lawyer's ominous words, and the chilling weight of the unknown compelled her to investigate further. A mixture of curiosity and trepidation warred within Mary as she hesitated at the threshold of John Varella's office. The door was ajar, offering a glimpse into the room, a silent invitation to intrude. She knew she shouldn't, that it was a violation of privacy, a transgression into a world that didn't belong to her. But the nagging feeling that something was deeply wrong with the Darkon deal, the persistent echo of the lawyer's ominous words, and the chilling weight of the unknown compelled her to take a risk. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open slightly and peered inside. John Varela was alone now, the heavy oak door closed behind him, isolating him in a pool of warm lamplight. The contract lay spread out on his desk, a stark white rectangle against the dark wood, its pages filled with the intricate language of legalese and financial jargon. He sat back in his leather chair, his tie loosened, a crystal glass of amber liquid swirling in his hand. His face was a mask of conflicting emotions, weariness, indecision, and a flicker of something that looked like fear. He read the documents in silence, his gaze intense, his expression troubled, like a man wrestling with a difficult choice, a decision that could make or break him. Mary watched him, her heart pounding in her chest, sensing the weight of the burden he carried, the invisible forces pulling him in different directions. Mary watched John Varela for a long moment, torn between her ingrained caution and an overwhelming urge to speak. She had always been a cautious person, calculating her every move, weighing the potential consequences before taking any action. But tonight, something stronger than prudence was stirring within her, a sense of urgency, a conviction that she had to intervene even if it meant risking her job, her reputation, perhaps even her safety. The contract on the desk, the ominous name Darkon, and the palpable tension in the room had ignited a spark of defiance. Within her, a refusal to stand by and watch something terrible unfold. She knew that John Varela was a powerful man, accustomed to giving orders and being obeyed, a figure who moved in a world of high-stakes deals and ruthless ambition. She also knew that she was, in his eyes, an invisible presence, a mere cleaner, someone whose opinions and concerns were likely to be dismissed without a second thought. But the weight of what she had overheard, the chilling implications of the darkened deal, and the persistent unease that gnawed at her soul pushed her past her inhibitions. She had to say something, had to warn him, even if it meant facing his scorn or his indifference. Taking a deep breath to steady her nerves, Mary tapped lightly on the door, the sound barely audible in the hushed room. John Varela looked up, his eyes widening in surprise as he registered her presence. The weariness in his face deepened, replaced by a flicker of irritation. The lawyers, their faces impassive, turned, their sharp gazes on her, their silence heavy with unspoken questions. Mary felt a wave of self-consciousness wash over her, the absurdity of her position hitting her with full force. What was she, a mere cleaner, doing interfering in the affairs of powerful men, in a world of million-dollar deals and ruthless ambition? "Oh, Mary," John Varela said, his voice laced with a hint of impatience. "Is there something you need?" He seemed eager to dismiss her, to resume his contemplation of the contract, his mind clearly preoccupied with the complex decisions he faced. Mary hesitated for a moment, her carefully rehearsed words catching in her throat. But the urgency of her conviction, the weight of her unease, pushed her forward. I apologize for intruding, Mr. Varela," she began, her voice barely a whisper, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her cleaning cloth. "But I couldn't help but overhear a bit of your conversation earlier. I know this is out of line," Mary continued, her voice gaining a bit more strength as she found her footing. "And it's none of my business, but there's something about this contract, something about this darkened deal. It doesn't feel right." She watched John Varela's face, searching for any sign that her words were registering, that he was taking her seriously. But his expression remained guarded, a mixture of curiosity and irritation, as if he were trying to decide whether to dismiss her as a meddling cleaner or entertain her concerns out of politeness. The lawyers, their faces still impassive, watched the exchange with a chilling intensity, their silence amplifying the awkwardness of the situation. John Varela's eyebrows arched slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "You overheard our conversation, Mary?" he asked, his tone laced with a hint of suspicion. Mary's cheeks flushed with heat, a wave of embarrassment washing over her. "I didn't mean to, sir," she stammered, her gaze dropping to the floor. The door was ajar, and the lawyers were speaking quite loudly. I couldn't help but catch a few words. Her explanation sounded weak and inadequate, and she braced herself for a reprimand, for a curt dismissal, for a reminder of her place in the hierarchy of the building. John Varela remained silent for a few agonizing seconds, his gaze fixed on Mary, his expression unreadable. It was as if he were weighing her words, trying to determine whether she was a genuine concern or simply a nosy employee overstepping her boundaries. The lawyers, their faces still impassive, watched the exchange with a chilling intensity, their silence amplifying the awkwardness of the situation. Mary's heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against the backdrop of the hushed office. She knew she was treading on thin ice, but she couldn't back down now. The weight of her unease, the premonition of danger, urged her to speak her truth. I don't know why I feel this way, Mr. Varela." Mary, I continued, her voice gaining a bit more confidence as she pressed on. "But that name, Darkon, I've heard it before, somewhere, a long time ago, and it left a bad taste in my mouth. It's like a warning sign, a red flag I can't ignore. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's just a coincidence, but please, sir, be careful with this contract. Please look into it closely before you sign." She finished her plea, her gaze pleading with John Varela to heed her words, to see the sincerity in her eyes, to understand the urgency of her conviction. The lawyers shifted slightly, their faces betraying a hint of impatience, as if they were eager to dismiss Mary and resume their interrupted negotiation. John Varela remained silent for a long moment, his gaze shifting from Mary to the contract on his desk. as if weighing her words against the potential benefits of the deal. The lawyers, their faces still impassive, exchanged a brief, unreadable glance, their silence heavy with a sense of impatience. Mary's heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against the backdrop of the hushed office. She knew she had overstepped her boundaries, that she was a mere cleaner interfering in the affairs of powerful men, but she couldn't silence the alarm bells ringing within her, the premonition of danger that urged her to speak her truth. Finally, John Varela broke the silence, his voice low and thoughtful. "And what exactly do you think is wrong, Mary?" he asked, his gaze still fixed on her, his expression a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Mary's fingers tightened around the cleaning cloth, her knuckles turning white as she struggled to find the words to articulate her unease. She knew that her explanation might sound absurd, that she had no concrete evidence to support her claims, but she had to try, had to warn him of the potential danger lurking beneath the surface of the darkened deal. Mary hesitated, her mind racing to find the right words, to convey the weight of her unease, without sounding foolish or hysterical. I can't explain it, Mr. Varela," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "It's just, this name, Darkin, it triggers something in me. A memory, a feeling. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's not good. It's like a warning, a sense of danger I can't shake off." She paused, her gaze pleading with him to understand. "I know it sounds strange, sir, but please just be careful. Please look into this contract thoroughly before you make any decisions." The lawyers shifted impatiently, their faces betraying their eagerness to dismiss Mary and resume their interrupted negotiation. Mary's words hung in the air, suspended between the polished veneer of the corporate world and the raw, visceral feeling that pulsed within her. John Varela's expression softened slightly, a flicker of curiosity replacing the initial skepticism. He studied her intently, his gaze searching her eyes for any hint of deception. The lawyers, however, remained unmoved, their faces still impassive, their silence heavy with a sense of dismissal. Mary's heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of hope and fear warring within her. She had spoken her truth, had voiced her concerns, but she had no idea whether it had been enough to penetrate the walls of power and influence that surrounded John Varela. John Varela released a slow sigh, more of exhaustion than irritation. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting from Mary to the contract, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the polished armrest. He was a man accustomed to making swift decisions, to trusting his instincts and the advice of his trusted advisors. But Mary's unexpected intervention, her heartfelt plea, had introduced a discordant note into the carefully orchestrated symphony of the deal. He couldn't quite dismiss her concerns, couldn't ignore the sincerity in her eyes, but he also couldn't afford to let the intuition of a cleaner derail a potentially lucrative opportunity. "It's kind of you to be concerned, Mary," John Varela said finally, his voice laced with a weariness that belied his usual confidence. "But I assure you, I know what I'm doing. This is a complex transaction, but I have a team of experts ensuring that everything is above board. There's no need for you to worry yourself about it." He offered a polite smile, a gesture of dismissal, but Mary sensed a flicker of uncertainty beneath the surface, a hint of doubt that contradicted his words. The lawyers, their faces still impassive, remained silent, their presence a subtle pressure, urging him to conclude the conversation and resume the negotiation. Mary wanted to press further, to insist that John Varela take her warnings seriously, but she sensed the limits of her influence. She was a cleaner, an employee in the lowest rung of the corporate ladder, and she couldn't afford to alienate the powerful men who controlled her livelihood. She had voiced her concerns, had planted a seed of doubt in his mind, and now she had to trust that it would be enough. The lawyers, their faces still impassive, watched the exchange with a chilling intensity, their presence a subtle reminder of the power dynamics at play. With a slight nod of her head, a gesture of resignation and unspoken plea, Mary turned to leave. "All right, Mr. Varela," she said, her voice barely audible. "I just wanted to say my piece. I hope I'm wrong about this, but please be careful." She backed away from the office, her gaze lingering on John Varela's troubled face, hoping that her words had resonated with him, that he would heed her warning before it was too late. The lawyers, their faces still impassive, remained silent, their presence a haunting reminder of the darkness that Mary sensed lurking beneath the surface of the Darkon deal. Mary turned and walked away from John Varella's office, a heavy sense of frustration weighing her down. She had done what she could, had spoken her truth, but she had no way of knowing whether her words had made any impact. John Varela seemed preoccupied, dismissive even, and the lawyer's presence was a silent reminder of the power dynamics at play. She felt like a small boat adrift in a vast ocean, her voice lost in the roar of the waves, her concerns insignificant in the face of a multi-million-dollar deal. As she resumed her cleaning routine, pushing her cart through the silent corridors, Mary couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled upon something significant, something dangerous. The name Darkon, the ominous whispers, the palpable tension in the conference room, it all pointed to a conspiracy, a hidden agenda that threatened to unravel the carefully constructed facade of the Varela and Associates building. A shiver ran down her spine, a premonition of impending chaos, and she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that her involvement in this mystery was far from over. Returning to the employee locker room, a small, utilitarian space tucked away in the basement of the building, Mary felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She sank onto a worn wooden bench, the harsh fluorescent lights casting long shadows on the tired faces of her fellow night shift workers. The events of the evening replayed in her mind, a chaotic jumble of whispered conversations, ominous names, and a chilling sense of impending danger. She closed her eyes, trying to shut out the noise, to find a moment of peace, but the restlessness within her refused to subside. It made no sense, she thought. The absurdity of her, a simple cleaner, becoming entangled in a web of corporate intrigue, a high-stakes game of power and ambition. She was an outsider, a silent observer in a world that had nothing to do with her, and yet, her instincts screamed that she was now a player, a reluctant participant in a drama that was unfolding around her. A shiver ran down her spine, a premonition of impending chaos, and she knew, with a certainty, that chilled her to the bone, that her journey into the heart of the Darkon mystery had only just begun. As Mary changed out of her uniform and prepared to leave for the night, the weight of the Darkon mystery pressed down on her, an invisible force pulling her deeper into its tangled web. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of something significant, something dangerous, and her instincts urged her to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The city lights blurred outside the window of the bus, a stark contrast to the darkness that had settled over her thoughts, the unsettling premonition that her life was about to be irrevocably altered. Mary made a decision as the bus rumbled through the quiet streets of Chicago. She had to know more about Darkon, had to understand why the name triggered such a visceral reaction within her, such a deep-seated sense of unease. It might be paranoia, she told herself, a product of an overactive imagination fueled by the tension of the internet. But what if it wasn't? What if her instincts were right, and Darkon was indeed a threat, a dark force lurking beneath the surface of the corporate world? She couldn't rest until she knew the truth, until she unraveled the mystery that had begun to consume her. The next day dawned cold and gray over Chicago, the towering skyscrapers shrouded in a misty haze that seemed to mirror the uncertainty swirling in Mary's mind. The events of the previous night clung to her like a persistent shadow. The ominous name Darkon, a relentless drumbeat in her thoughts. She went through the motions of her morning routine, preparing her son for school, packing his lunch, and sending him off with a kiss and a smile that belied the turmoil within her. But beneath the surface of normalcy, a sense of unease simmered, a premonition that the ordinary rhythms of her life were about to be shattered. As Mary made her way back downtown for her evening shift, the city seemed different, charged with a hidden energy, a sense of anticipation that prickled her skin. The familiar landmarks, the bustling crowds, the towering buildings that had always been a backdrop to her life now felt like part of a larger, more sinister puzzle. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that unseen eyes were following her every move, and the weight of the Darkon mystery pressed down on her, a chilling reminder of the danger that lay ahead. The ordinary world had become a stage for a drama she didn't fully understand, but she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that she was destined to play a crucial role. As Mary arrived at the Varela and Associates building, the familiar scent of lemon cleaner and polished wood did little to soothe the unease that churned within her. She greeted her fellow night shift workers with a polite smile, but her mind was preoccupied, her thoughts fixated on the name Darkon and the ominous implications of the contract. She had to find out more, to understand the connection between this powerful corporation and the unsettling feeling it evoked within her. The weight of the mystery pressed down on her, a chilling reminder of the danger that lay ahead, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she was about to embark on a perilous journey. With a determined set to her jaw, Mary began her cleaning routine, her eyes scanning every document left carelessly on a desk, every scrap of paper discarded in a trash can. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, but she was driven by an inexplicable urge to find any mention of Darkon, any clue that would shed light on their involvement with Varela and Associates. The ordinary tasks of her job had become a desperate search for answers, a silent quest for truth in the heart of a corporate labyrinth. The hum of the ventilation system seemed to whisper the name Darkon, a constant reminder of the mystery that had taken root in her soul, and the silence of the building felt heavy with unspoken secrets. As Mary cleaned the administrative offices, her eyes scanned the room, searching for any clue, any hint that would lead her closer to the truth about Darkon. A discarded memo, a scribbled note, a carelessly tossed aside document. She examined them all with a growing sense of urgency. The hum of the computers and the faint murmur of the air conditioning seemed to amplify the silence, creating an atmosphere of hushed secrets and hidden agendas. She felt like an intruder in a world of power and influence, a silent observer in a drama that was unfolding around her, and the weight of the unknown pressed down on her, a chilling reminder of the danger that lay ahead. While emptying a trash can near a row of cubicles, Mary's attention was drawn to a crumpled piece of paper, lying half-buried beneath discarded coffee cups and crumpled tissues. Without hesitation, she reached in and carefully unfolded the paper, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. It was a hastily scribbled note, and the words scrawled across its surface sent a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. The name Darkon Investments was prominently displayed, followed by a series of numbers and initials that made no sense to her. But the sight of the name, written in such a casual, almost careless manner, confirmed her worst fears. Darkon was indeed connected to Varela and Associates, and their involvement was far more significant than she could have imagined. Mary carefully folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The discovery was a small victory, a confirmation that her instincts were correct, but it also deepened the mystery surrounding Darkon and their involvement with Varela and Associates. She glanced around the office, the hum of the computers and the faint murmur of the air conditioning now sounding like a chorus of whispers, urging her to dig deeper, to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The weight of the unknown pressed down on her, a chilling reminder of the danger that lay ahead, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she was now fully immersed in a perilous game. As Mary continued her cleaning routine, a sense of urgency propelled her forward. She had to find more information about Darkon, had to understand the nature of their relationship with Varela and Associates, and had to decipher the meaning of the numbers and initials scribbled on the crumpled note. The ordinary tasks of her job had become a desperate search for answers, a silent quest for truth in the heart of a corporate labyrinth. She felt like a detective in a film noir, navigating a shadowy world of secrets and lies, and the stakes were far higher than she could have ever imagined. As Mary continued her cleaning routine, her determination grew stronger with each passing moment. She knew she was venturing into dangerous territory, but the need to uncover the truth about Darkon and their involvement with Varela and Associates outweighed her fear. She moved with purpose, her eyes scanning every corner of the offices, searching for any clue that would lead her closer to the heart of the mystery. The ordinary tasks of her job had become a high-stakes investigation, a silent battle against unseen forces. While cleaning the file room, a restricted area she rarely needed to enter, Mary noticed that the door was slightly ajar. A surge of Adrenaline coursed through her veins. This was a chance to access information that was usually kept hidden, a potential goldmine of clues about Darkon. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open and slipped inside, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The room was filled with rows upon rows of filing cabinets, each one a silent guardian of the company's secrets. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and the weight of unspoken truths. The silence of the file room was broken only by the soft rustling of paper as Mary began her search. The cabinets loomed around her like silent giants, their metal surfaces cold and unforgiving. Each drawer contained folders filled with documents, contracts, and memos, the lifeblood of Varela and Associates. Mary moved with a sense of purpose, her eyes scanning the labels, her mind racing to find any mention of Darkon. The air was thick with the weight of the company's history, the echoes of past deals and decisions, and Mary felt a growing sense of unease as she delved deeper into the heart of the corporate labyrinth. Her search was abruptly interrupted by a sound in the hallway, a soft footstep that broke the silence like a gunshot. Mary froze, her heart leaping into her throat, her senses on high alert. She held her breath, listening intently, trying to discern the source of the noise. The sound came again, closer this time, and Mary realized with a jolt of fear that someone was approaching the file room. She had to hide, and fast, before she was caught trespassing in this restricted area. The consequences of being discovered were dire, and she knew she had to protect the information she was seeking, no matter the cost. Panic seized Mary as she desperately scanned the room for a hiding place. The filing cabinets offered the only refuge, their narrow spaces barely large enough to conceal a person. Without hesitation, she squeezed herself into the cramped space between two cabinets, the cold metal pressing against her skin, the scent of old paper filling her nostrils. She held her breath, her heart pounding in her ears, praying that she wouldn't be discovered. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and Mary braced herself for the worst, her mind racing with the potential consequences of her actions. The silence of the file room, once heavy with secrets, now throbbed with the threat of exposure. The footsteps stopped just outside the file room door, and Mary's breath caught in her throat. She could hear voices, low and muffled, but she couldn't make out the words. A wave of fear washed over her, the realization that she was trapped, vulnerable, and at the mercy of whoever was on the other side of the door. She closed her eyes, trying to control her racing thoughts, to focus on the task at hand, to remember why she had risked so much to enter this forbidden space. The name Darkon echoed in her mind, a reminder of the mystery that had drawn her into this perilous situation, and the determination to uncover the truth gave her the strength to endure the agonizing wait. The voices outside the door faded away, leaving Mary once again in the suffocating silence of the file room. She waited for a few more agonizing moments to ensure that she was truly alone before cautiously emerging from her hiding place. Brushing off the dust from her clothes, she resumed her search, her movements quick and efficient, her mind focused on the task at hand. She had to find the information about Darkon, had to uncover the truth about their involvement with Varela and Associates, and she had to do it before she was caught. The weight of the company's secrets pressed down on her, a chilling reminder of the danger that lurked in the shadows. After what seemed like an eternity, Mary finally found a folder labeled External Investments. Her heart skipped a beat as she carefully pulled it from the cabinet and opened it. Inside, she found documents related to various companies, including Darkon's investments. A surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins as she began to flip through the pages, her eyes scanning for any clue, any detail that would shed light on Darkon's activities. The legal jargon and financial terms were complex and confusing, but Mary was determined to decipher their meaning, to unravel the mystery that had drawn her into this perilous situation. As Mary delved deeper into the documents, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Darkon Investments was involved in numerous transactions with shell companies located in various offshore tax havens. The amounts of money being transferred were staggering, and the language used in the contracts was vague and ambiguous, filled with loopholes that seemed designed to exploit and manipulate. A cold dread settled over Mary as she realized the true nature of Darkon's activities. They weren't just investors. They were predators, preying on vulnerable companies and leaving a trail of financial ruin in their wake. The weight of this discovery pressed down on her, a chilling reminder of the danger she had stumbled upon. With trembling hands, Mary carefully placed the folder back in its place, her mind reeling from the implications of what she had found. She memorized key details, names, dates, and amounts, knowing that this information could be crucial in exposing Darkon's fraudulent activities. As she turned to leave the file room, a mixture of adrenaline and fear coursed through her veins. She had uncovered a dark secret, a conspiracy that reached far beyond the walls of Varela and Associates. The consequences of her actions were uncertain, but she knew she couldn't turn back now. The truth had to be revealed, no matter the cost. Emerging from the file room, Mary felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with a chilling sense of vulnerability. She had crossed a line, had delved into the company's most closely guarded secrets, and she knew that if she were caught, the consequences would be severe. But the fear was tempered by a fierce determination to expose the truth, to bring Darkon's fraudulent activities to light, and to protect others from falling victim to their schemes. She clutched the memory of the information she had memorized, a weapon against the darkness that threatened to engulf her. Making her way to the employee break room, Mary found a quiet corner and pulled out a small notebook and pen. With trembling hands, she began to jot down everything she could remember from the documents she had seen in the file room. Names, dates, amounts, shell companies, offshore accounts. She recorded every detail, every piece of evidence that could help expose Darkon's corruption. The task was daunting, the information overwhelming, but Mary was driven by a force stronger than fear, a burning desire for justice, a refusal to allow the powerful to exploit the vulnerable. As she wrote, a plan began to form in her mind. She would use this information to expose Darkon, to reveal their fraudulent activities to the world. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed an ally, someone who could help her navigate the complex web of corporate intrigue and ensure that her voice was heard. She thought of John Varela, the CEO of Varela and Associates, the man who was about to sign the contract with Darkon. He was powerful, influential, and potentially a key player in uncovering the truth. But could she trust him? Would he believe her? Before finishing her shift, Mary made her way back to John Varela's office. He was still there, hunched over the contract, his face etched with worry. The decision was made. She had to try. She had to warn him about Darkon, to share the information she had uncovered, and to hope that he would listen. The confrontation was inevitable, and Mary stepped towards it, ready to risk everything for the truth.